Your person was introduced to someone new for marriage. Then a secret recording of you was played. My beloved child, hold your heart for just a moment, because what you are about to hear was never meant to reach your ears this soon. There is a quiet chapter unfolding somewhere beyond your sight, and every passing second is pulling it closer to you. Imagine a room filled with polite smiles, careful conversations, and hopeful expectations. Your person was invited there to meet someone their family believed could become their future. Everything appeared calm on the surface. Every word sounded planned. Every glance seemed ordinary. Yet destiny has a strange habit of entering through doors no one remembers opening. Stay with this message, because the moment that changed everything did not begin with a conversation, it began with a sound. A recording. A voice. Your voice. And once it echoed through that room, nothing remained as it had been only moments before. The meeting had started exactly as everyone expected. Families exchanged stories. Questions were asked with kindness. Laughter appeared where silence once lived. From the outside, anyone watching would have believed this was another ordinary introduction, another simple step toward a predictable future. But hidden beneath those peaceful expressions was something no one could explain. Your person felt distracted in a way they could not understand. Their attention wandered as if an invisible memory kept gently calling their name. They smiled when expected, answered every question with respect, yet inside, another conversation was taking place. Have you ever noticed how the heart sometimes recognizes a truth before the mind is ready to admit it? That invisible feeling was growing stronger with every passing minute. Wait a little longer, because what happened next turned quiet curiosity into unforgettable certainty. Then came the unexpected interruption. Someone reached for a phone. At first, nobody thought twice about it. Perhaps it was an old family memory, a celebration, or a message from someone unable to attend. But the atmosphere shifted the instant the screen lit up. A single sentence was spoken: "There is something you should hear before any decision is made." The room became still. Even those who had been speaking only seconds before fell silent without realizing why. No one knew what was about to play. Not your person. Not the families. Not even the one holding the device understood how deeply those next few moments would travel into every heart present. The recording did not begin with dramatic music or emotional speeches. It began with honesty. Calm. Genuine. Every word carried the unmistakable weight of someone speaking without trying to impress anyone. Your voice spoke about loyalty, about believing that real connections are built slowly, patiently, and truthfully. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a promise. It was simply the kind of message that reveals who someone truly becomes when nobody expects applause. Strange, isn't it? Sometimes the most ordinary words become extraordinary when they arrive at the exact moment destiny has prepared for them. Your person froze. Not because they were shocked by the sound itself, but because something familiar awakened inside them. Every sentence seemed to answer questions they had never spoken aloud. Every pause felt meaningful. Every quiet breath inside that recording carried more truth than hours of conversation taking place around the room. Suddenly, the carefully prepared introduction no longer held their full attention. Their thoughts had traveled somewhere else entirely. Somewhere only the heart could reach. The others noticed the change immediately. Expressions softened. A few exchanged silent glances. Nobody interrupted the recording. It was almost as though the room itself understood that something important was unfolding. Time seemed slower. Even ordinary sounds faded into the background. What if one unexpected moment has the power to rewrite an entire direction? What if the future sometimes arrives disguised as a simple voice played through an ordinary speaker? As the recording continued, your person remembered tiny details they thought they had forgotten. Conversations that once seemed insignificant suddenly carried new meaning. Moments they had brushed aside quietly returned, clearer than ever before. It felt less like hearing a recording, and more like rediscovering a missing piece of themselves. The person sitting across from them noticed the silence too. Yet instead of discomfort, there was understanding. Not every connection is meant to compete. Some simply reveal what already exists. Now something remarkable began happening inside your person's heart. The questions they had arrived with slowly disappeared. New ones took their place. Why did this voice feel so familiar? Why did these words carry so much peace? Why did every carefully planned expectation suddenly seem less certain than before? Those answers were not ready to reveal themselves yet. Destiny rarely rushes its greatest moments. It unfolds them one careful layer at a time. So before you move on, keep this thought close. Sometimes life doesn't change because someone speaks louder, it changes because the right words arrive at the right soul at exactly the right moment. And believe it or not, the recording has only just begun to reveal its deepest purpose. The next few moments will uncover what happened after the final word faded away, and why everyone in that room looked at your person differently than before. Stay close, because the real turning point is still waiting ahead. A strange silence settled over the room, not the kind that feels uncomfortable, but the kind that makes every heartbeat seem louder than before. The recording had ended, yet no one reached to stop the moment from lingering. It was as though every person present was quietly asking themselves the same question: why did those simple words carry so much weight? Stay with this story, because the next few minutes revealed something no one had expected when they first walked through that door. Your person lowered their eyes for a brief moment. They were no longer looking at the family gathered around them. Their thoughts had traveled somewhere much farther away. The voice they had just heard wasn't asking for attention. It wasn't trying to persuade anyone. And perhaps that was exactly why it became impossible to ignore. Truth has a quiet strength. It never needs to raise its volume. One family member finally smiled and gently asked, "Did that recording remind you of someone?" It was an innocent question, yet it reached deeper than anyone realized. Your person didn't answer immediately. Instead, they took a slow breath, as if searching for words that had suddenly become difficult to find. Sometimes the heart recognizes an answer long before the mouth is ready to speak it. Across the room, the person they had been introduced to watched carefully. There was kindness in their expression, not disappointment. Almost as though they understood this moment wasn't about comparison, it was about clarity. Life has an unusual way of revealing what truly belongs to us. The clearer the truth becomes, the less confusion remains. Then something unexpected happened. The phone holding the recording lit up once again. Another unseen voice quietly said, "There is one more part, it wasn't supposed to be played today." Every face turned toward the screen. Even the people who had barely paid attention before now leaned forward without realizing it. Curiosity had transformed into anticipation. Wait a little longer, because what followed wasn't louder, it was deeper. The second recording wasn't about memories. It spoke about choosing people who bring peace instead of pressure. About standing beside someone whose presence makes you feel more like yourself, not less. It described a connection built on trust rather than appearances, patience rather than urgency, understanding rather than perfect timing. Your person's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for everyone nearby to notice. It was the expression of someone realizing that the answers they had been searching for were quietly standing in front of them all along. One elder in the room whispered softly, "Some decisions cannot be rushed." No one argued. Because somehow, everyone felt those words were true. If you've stayed with this message until now, leave a comment sharing one word that represents what you value most in a relationship. Sometimes reading another person's hope reminds us of our own. And if this story has spoken to you in an unexpected way, consider subscribing so you don't miss what unfolds next. Because the biggest revelation hasn't arrived yet. Your person finally looked up. Instead of continuing the conversation about marriage, they asked a completely different question. Where did this recording come from? The room fell silent once again. The one holding the phone hesitated, almost smiling. "It reached us by accident," they replied. But after hearing it, none of us believed it was an accident anymore. Those words echoed far beyond the walls of that room. Because suddenly, this meeting was no longer about choosing between two futures. It had become about recognizing the future that had quietly been waiting all along. Yet one final mystery remained unanswered. Who had decided to play your recording, and why did they seem to know far more about your connection than anyone else? The answer to that question would leave even your person speechless. And that unforgettable moment is only beginning. Before you decide what this story means, pause for one final moment. The greatest turning points rarely announce themselves with noise. They arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, until one unexpected truth connects every unanswered question. What happened after that mysterious phone was placed back on the table changed the direction of the entire gathering. No one left the room the same person they had been when they entered. Stay until the very end. Because the final piece of this moment was hidden in plain sight all along. The person holding the phone looked around the room before speaking again. "There is something we never told anyone." Those simple words instantly captured every eye. This recording wasn't sent to convince anyone, it arrived weeks ago with no explanation. We almost deleted it. But for some reason, none of us could. Silence returned. Not awkward. Not heavy. Purposeful. Almost as if everyone suddenly understood they had become part of a moment larger than themselves. Your person remained completely still. Inside, however, everything was changing. The questions that once filled their mind were beginning to disappear, replaced by a peaceful certainty they couldn't easily explain. Have you ever experienced a moment where nothing around you changes, yet everything inside you suddenly feels different? That was exactly what was happening. One family member quietly asked, "Do you know whose voice this truly is?" Your person didn't answer immediately. Instead, they smiled. A small smile. The kind that appears only when someone stops running from what their heart has quietly known for a very long time. "I think," they finally whispered, "I've been hearing this voice long before today." Nobody expected that answer. The room became even quieter. Then the person who had been introduced for marriage spoke for the very first time since the recording ended. "I don't think this meeting was meant to separate anyone," they said gently. "I think it was meant to reveal something that was already real." Those words surprised everyone. There was no disappointment. No bitterness. Only wisdom. Sometimes another person doesn't enter our life to compete with our story. Sometimes they arrive simply to help us recognize it. The atmosphere completely shifted. What began as a formal introduction slowly transformed into an honest conversation about timing, trust, and listening to the quiet voice within instead of outside expectations. Your person finally admitted something they had never said aloud. "For weeks, I kept trying to move forward, but every step felt incomplete. I thought I needed answers from the world. Maybe I only needed to be honest with myself." No one interrupted. Because truth has a remarkable way of creating peace instead of arguments. If this message has reached your heart today, share in the comments one word that describes the kind of connection you hope to build in your own life. Reading those words may encourage someone else who needs hope today. And if stories like this inspire you to look deeper than appearances, consider subscribing so we can continue exploring these extraordinary moments together. Just when everyone believed the conversation had reached its conclusion, the phone vibrated once more. A new notification appeared. No name. No profile picture. Only a single sentence. The recording was never about changing a decision, it was about revealing the truth before a decision was made. Every person in the room read those words. No one spoke. Because nothing more needed to be said. Your person slowly stood up. Not to leave in confusion, but to walk forward with clarity. They thanked everyone with genuine respect, carrying no anger, no regret, and no fear of what came next. As they reached the doorway, they paused for one final glance. Not at the room. Not at the phone. But toward the future they now felt ready to face. And in that quiet moment, one realization became impossible to ignore. Some voices are never meant to control your path. They are meant to remind you of the path your heart recognized long before your mind was ready to follow. The recording had ended. But its message was only beginning to change everything. One final chapter remains, and it begins where most stories would choose to end. The room was slowly emptying, conversations had become softer, and the evening seemed ready to return to normal. Yet destiny wasn't finished. Sometimes the greatest revelation waits until everyone believes the moment has already passed. Stay with me until the final line, because what happened next became the reason this unforgettable story would be remembered for years. As your person stepped outside, they felt something they hadn't experienced in a long time. Not confusion. Not pressure. Peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from having every answer. It was the peace that arrives when your heart finally stops fighting itself. The cool air carried away the weight they had been holding for so long. For the first time in weeks, they weren't thinking about expectations, opinions, or perfect timing. They were thinking about authenticity. About choosing a future that felt honest instead of merely acceptable. Then footsteps approached from behind. It was one of the elders from the gathering. The elder smiled warmly and said, "Sometimes life introduces us to the wrong door, only so we finally notice the right one." Those words settled deeply. Your person nodded, not because someone had made the decision for them, but because those words reflected what they were already beginning to believe. The mysterious recording had never forced a choice. It had simply removed the noise that had been hiding the truth. As they prepared to leave, the same phone buzzed one final time. Everyone looked at it. The screen displayed a single message. When a connection is built on honesty, time becomes its greatest witness. No signature. No explanation. Only those words. For a long moment, nobody reached for the device. Because somehow, everyone understood that the message belonged to every person who had been present. Your person smiled. Not because every mystery had been solved, but because they no longer needed every mystery to be solved. They had discovered something even more valuable: clarity. That evening was never remembered as the day of a marriage introduction. It became remembered as the day someone found the courage to listen to their own heart. Perhaps that is the quiet miracle hidden inside moments like these. Life doesn't always redirect us with dramatic events. Sometimes it gently places one unexpected voice in our path, and allows truth to do the rest. If this story has stayed with you until this final chapter, thank you for being part of the journey. Share your thoughts in the comments. What moment in this story spoke to you the most? And if you enjoy uplifting stories about destiny, self-discovery, and meaningful connections, consider subscribing so you can join us again for the next unforgettable journey. Now carry this final thought with you. The recording was never the real surprise. The real surprise was discovering that one honest voice could awaken a truth that had been quietly waiting inside all along. Some meetings end with introductions. Some end with decisions. But the rarest ones end with people becoming brave enough to choose the future that already feels like home. And perhaps, somewhere beyond what you can see today, a new chapter has already begun. One last reflection, before this story quietly fades into the distance. If you've stayed with every moment until now, you've probably realized this was never simply about a recording or a meeting. It was about what happens when truth arrives at exactly the moment someone is ready to hear it. And sometimes, that timing changes everything. Don't leave just yet, because the final message may become the one you remember long after this story ends. Days passed after that unforgettable gathering. Life appeared normal again. The families returned to their routines. Conversations slowed. The mysterious phone was no longer mentioned. Yet something had undeniably changed. Your person no longer measured their future by expectations placed before them. Instead, they began paying attention to the quiet feeling that had awakened the moment your voice filled that room. One evening, while sitting alone, they replayed every detail in their mind. Not because they were trapped in the past, but because they finally understood what the recording had truly revealed. It wasn't trying to convince them to choose someone. It was reminding them to choose honesty over pressure, peace over confusion, and authenticity over appearances. That realization became the turning point. Soon afterward, they made a decision that surprised even those closest to them. They politely asked for more time before making any life-changing commitment. Some people questioned the decision. Others respected it. But your person wasn't trying to satisfy every opinion anymore. For the first time, they were listening to the quiet confidence growing inside them. And strangely, the more honest they became with themselves, the lighter everything felt. Weeks later, one of the family members who had attended that meeting smiled and admitted something unexpected. That recording changed more than one heart. Everyone looked surprised. The family member continued. It reminded all of us that important decisions deserve sincere reflection, not hurried conclusions. At that moment, everyone realized the mysterious recording had done something no one had planned. It had brought clarity without creating conflict, understanding without arguments, hope without pressure. That is the quiet strength of truth. It doesn't force doors open. It simply shines enough light for people to recognize the right path. So if this story has found you today, perhaps its greatest message isn't about destiny happening to you,